Hello there. You're probably wondering what's going on with all the creepy music this lesson. Well, I have some bad news for you. Today's lesson is all about math. Don't worry though, I have good news. It's easy math. Please stop. Anyway, the math that we're going to learn this lesson is easy. So as long as you can multiply and divide using a calculator, you're going to be absolutely fine, no matter how good or bad you are at math. In fact, there are only two very, very simple equations that you need to know for the technician class license. And these equations I've written up here on the board. E equals I times R, and this is known as Ohm's law. That's the first equation. And the second equation is P equals I times E. Okay, so I've written a key over here so we can know what these letters mean. This sort of relates to the electricity lesson we've had over the past two lessons. E stands for voltage, voltage, voltage. I stands for current. P stands for power. We're about to learn what that means. And R stands for resistance. So we can actually use these equations to calculate the actual numerical values of voltage, current, power, and resistance. But you might notice we haven't actually learned about power yet. So what is power in electricity? So power is basically just the rate at which electricity is used up. Power is the rate at which electricity is used. And power is measured in a unit called watts, which you may have heard of, watts. We commonly use that to measure how much electricity is flowing throughout your house or throughout your electrical appliances. So anyway, these are the only two equations you'll need to remember, and you can use a calculator on the test. So there are a few tricks that I have here to help you remember these two equations, which at first they might look a little hard to memorize. But there are a few things we can use. So one of them is a sort of a little rhyme that we have. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, voltage equals I times R. You don't have to sing that if you feel weird. You can if you want. But just remember this. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, voltage E equals I times R. And that rhymes. That will also help you. That will help you for this equation. And for this second equation, we also have a trick. You'll notice, look at the letters. It's P equals I times E. It has the letters P, then I, then E. That spells out pi. So you can just remember the word pi, and then memorizing this equation becomes as easy as pi. Very simple once you get the hang of it. And you can devote some extra time to studying these equations and making sure that you know them and memorize them. So the technician class exam is going to have a lot of questions where you will have to use these equations in various different ways. And sometimes you might also have to rearrange these equations in order to get what the test wants. For example, the E equals I times R equation. Sometimes the test will ask you for the value of E, voltage, and then you can simply just plug in the numbers for I and R, which they will give you. They'll always give you two of the numbers and ask you to solve for the third one. So that's pretty simple, just plug it into the equation, I times R, then you get E out. But sometimes the test will ask you for R, and it will give you E and I, but it won't give you R, and it'll ask you for R. And then you have to rearrange the equation using simple algebra in order to solve for R. But luckily, there's a little trick in the Gordon West manual to make this a little less complicated. And these are we call them magic circles. So if you want, you can refer to the first page in this section about, this section is the ohm section. It's the law per ohm. You can refer to the first page in that section. The blue ham hint in the Gordon West manual on the first page has these two circles which help you memorize these equations, and I drew them on the board. These are what we call the magic circles. You notice E equals I times R, P equals I times E, but we drew them in this sort of strange way, and in a minute you'll see why. So this will really help you on the test. What you do is you cover the missing quantity with your finger, with your thumb or something, and then the rest of the circle will tell you what to do in order to solve for what you're missing. So in other words, let's try some examples here. So let's say that the test tells you that the current is 5 and R is 2, the resistance is 2. So I is 5, R is 2, and it asks for E. So let's go to the magic circle here. Now the missing quantity that we don't have is E. So I'm going to cover the letter E with my thumb. And then what do we have? The other letters are I and R. Now with the magic circle, if there are two things that are next to each other like this, you multiply them. So then we multiply I times R because they're right next to each other. Then we'd multiply 5 times 2 and we get 10. And then now we have E equals 10. So let's try another example here. What if they say that the voltage is 5 and the current is 2, and then they ask for R? Now we're trying to find R, resistance. That's the thing we don't have, we're missing it. So we cover R with our finger. We cover the missing quantity with our finger. Now, if there's one letter that's above the other letter, not next to this time, it's above, what we do is we divide. We almost pretend this is a denominator line. So then now we have the equation e over I equals the thing we're missing, which is r. So we just take e and we divide it by r. And so we would get the answer 2.5. For 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. And obviously you could also cover I, and then to find I, then you would obviously find e over r, that equals I. So in this way, these magic circles help us to be able to solve these questions on the test. And obviously this circle works in the same way. So if this seems a little confusing, you'll get the hang of it eventually. Now also a note, you can use a calculator for whatever you want when you're solving these math problems. The technician class exam, when you take it, will also allow you to use a calculator. The examiners might have you clear the memory off the calculator before the exam starts, but they will let you use any kind of calculator. You can have a scientific calculator or a graphing calculator. You don't need a graphing calculator. Just any basic calculator is fine. All you'll really need to do is multiply and divide. So anyway, definitely use a calculator for multiplying and dividing when using these equations, because there's really no reason not to.